Hello again, viewers and listeners. Welcome to the Product Uncensored show. Today is actually episode 37, and I am still your host. If you don't know, my name is Colin, and before we go into the usual introduction, I thought I would share something interesting with you. At the end of September, right, the Product Uncensored show actually featured on Nigeria's Apple Podcast Technology charts. Now, granted, it was somewhere around 100 plus or something, but hey, a win is a win. So, yes, a new country tackled by the Product Uncensored show. Now, let's go on to the three things before we begin, right? As you know, we're on YouTube, and I'm sure all of you watch enough YouTube videos to know the drill, right? You watch the video, you click on the subscribe button, and then that final step is please help me click on the bell notification icon, right? Second one is the podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms. I think it will show up here. You would think I would know this by now, but I don't, but I think it's here. And then don't forget to also follow the podcast channel. And finally, if you want to support the show, there will be a link in the description where you can support the show for the price of a coffee. Purely voluntary, and if you don't want to, no problem. Okay, now we are going to go into our MVP for today. And no, I'm not saying he is the minimum viable product. I'm talking about the most valuable player for today. Our guest today, very impressive CV, right? He studied at MIT, cut his product teeth at Rakuten Viki, went on to Shopee and Grab, and now he is the Chief Product Officer at Lineman Wongnai in Thailand. He is none other than Fabian Lua. Welcome to the show, Fabian.
Very excited to be here. Thank you, Colin. Great to see you.
It's been a while since we actually met. So for those of you who want to know, like, is there some prior history, right? Yes, we met at a regional product unconference, I think we called it at that time, right? And that was how we met. And then since then, Fabian has gone on from strength to strength. So it's a nice reunion of sorts for us today. And also, we reconnected recently when he actually started his role at Lineman. So yeah, and I was thinking, hey, I think this would be a fantastic person to have on the show. So Fabian, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. All right. So let's start with the usual pleasantries of tell us more, give us that 1 minute summary of who Fabian Lua is from a product standpoint and, your story about getting into product management.
Oh, I'm not sure if I can fit it into 1 minute.
Okay, it's usually I say 1 minute and then usually it'll go on for about five, so it's okay.
Yeah, sure. So right now my title is Chief Product Officer, but in my mind, and I think in a lot of our minds, we always think of ourselves as product managers, problem solvers. So I kind of fell into product management because after my very first job, which was at Singapore Airlines, pricing airline tickets, optimizing the network, figuring out which aircraft to buy, I really wanted to move to Silicon Valley, join there. I actually flew over there, met lots of people. Very long story short, I ended up meeting the CEO of Viki, got my first gig as a product manager there. Love the job. It's interdisciplinary. I love that aspect of it. Have been pretty much in product management since then. As Colin mentioned, I was with Shopee. Very exciting times from zero to one, from one to being number one in Southeast Asia, I guess. With Grab, I was there since it was a ride-hailing app originally. That was just right after Uber left the market, and then was with it to the journey to being a super app to IPO. And now I just pretty recently, half a year ago, started my journey with Lineman Wongnai. Yeah.
Okay, that was really good, man. You said you couldn't fit it in. It was maybe 2 minutes or something. So that's impressive. 20,000 points for you. So yeah. Actually, I had a curious question for you, right? You started in Rakuten Viki. Was that the same time that Jonathan was there, Jonathan Wong?
No, I think I I probably was there before he was.
Okay.
Yeah, and so for example, when I was there, it was not Rakuten Viki, it was Viki.
Okay.
The difference. time. I think back at the time, it's still. I think when I joined, it was I don't know, like in the teens or 20s of people.
Okay.
Yeah, so pretty small back then.
Right, right. Okay. For those of you wondering who is this Jonathan guy, he's actually another guest on the show. Some yeah, somewhere the link will be up there. And yeah, it was actually quite interesting to realize that, I think you guys will notice by now that the product management world in Southeast Asia is super small. Like
Yeah.
after a while, you can link this guy to that girl, to that person, to the other person, and you realize that, I mean, I'm going to say something slightly controversial here. It's not half as incestuous as, banks and some telco companies, but it's still a very small world in product management, especially in Southeast Asia. So yeah, I just thought that was quite interesting. Okay, we shall move on from there and talk about, real product management stuff. So let's start with this, the part where you said you wanted to work in the Silicon Valley and then you ended up at Viki. Well, back then wasn't Rakuten Viki yet, right? What made you decide to join Viki at that time as, as a product person? Like, did you already know what it was? Or yeah.
Yeah, I guess I mean I would say the good thing that a short trip to Silicon Valley taught me was really that is in many ways the people that matter. I met lots of amazing people there. I met this guy whose company was actually hired by Facebook. He gave me a ride to the airport or something. So I was having long conversations with him. Like a lot of these people actually felt like, hey, I should just join wherever they are. Like a lot of them were cooking up new things, new startups, lots of passion for it. And I went to lots of like events, got to know people. People referred me to more people, and so eventually I was referred to Razmik, who's the CEO of Viki in Singapore. I was actually on a short trip back home before I went back to San Francisco to look for a job. I talked to him for pretty short time, like maybe 10 minutes. And then he was like, hey, why don't you join us? Right. And I don't know how many people have managed to meet Razmik, but he's someone who he can sell you anything, right? So his superpower is sales. Plus, I think Viki is a very exciting company in terms of like this is pre Netflix, right? This is the era where Netflix was probably still like I don't know.
Sorry.
Yeah, return a DVD and get another one, or it's not a buffet free flow. So Viki was kind of Netflix for the rest of the world's content, right? This is way before the Squid Game. So like being able to watch Korean content with like Arabic subtitles, with Spanish subtitles, with a passionate community of people doing the subtitling, I think it is amazing. It's something that not just in Singapore or Southeast Asia that nobody else was doing. Legally, I mean, there's all the there's all the pirated stuff online. Doing it legally, so I think this aspect of like breaking down the cultural walls really attracted me, and I was also specifically looking for like you come in and you just try to make impact. You do all sorts of different stuff. So at Viki, I got that experience. I was product manager, but I was also running ad campaigns for PNG as a ad operations because we didn't have ad operations. I think that's what startups are like.
Yeah. So when you joined Viki, right, was it because because you were in the valley as well, in the Bay, and you were saying you're trying to get in. So I'm assuming that your goal from the start was to join one of the tech startups around there. So you had kind of been bitten by the startup bug already, is it?
Yes, I was. Yeah. I think I mean I never imagined I would stick around in Singapore, to be honest. At that point, nobody knew what product management is. Definitely, my family is like, why would you leave a reputable company like Singapore Airlines to join a company nobody has heard of to do a role that nobody understands what you're doing? So it was kind of like that, but I think Viki felt special, and I think now looking back, is special, right? of the team of maybe, by the time I left, maybe it was like 60 people. I think that at least like, I don't know, like 12, 15 startups that have come from this group of people since then. It's pretty high ratio. Yeah. And people were from all over the world, which was really interesting as well. I think within this 60 people, again, there were like maybe 15 nationalities at least. So it was great fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you can call them now the Viki Mafia, right?
I mean, given that reference, I don't think there's really a mafia going on, but I'm still proud that there is that entrepreneurial spirit among so many people. But we have not, as far as I know, created a Tesla or we have not, or a Palantir. But
Wow.
yeah, but
Huge.
still,
Wow,
proud
very
of.
very high standards. Okay, okay. I was just thinking more of the group, but yes, yeah, okay. But still. Okay. So I'm not gonna go through like all your work story. I'll just picking up things that I thought was interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then before you went to Shopee, you actually worked with Peatix
Yeah.
as their GM as well, which was well at least on paper lah, doesn't sound like a product role. So
Yeah.
I'm quite curious to know what happened there, or why did you decide to do that?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the way I make career decisions, I don't know if this violates the show's rules, but it's
No, there's
not.
no there are no rules.
it, it's not very structured. I think the part where I structure it is that I always believe that, hey, I should join somewhere where it's founder led, right? Because working at Viki, working with Rasmik really helped me understand like that drive is so strong, right? And even, no offense to people from Singapore Airlines, but looking at Singapore Airlines, I can feel that the pioneer group of people who grew the company, right? There was just something special about it. So with Peatix, I actually met one of the founders at an event when I already left Viki. I was just hanging out with the community, in Singapore. I think it was a JFDI, which is a incubator accelerator demo day, and I was there helping them be a photographer because save money and don't waste money on a photographer when someone can help. And then I just talked to people. I met this lady. She's Emmy, so who's one of the founders of Peatix, right? And yeah, I just felt like, okay, I could help them out for a while. So it was a temporary gig, and we worked together, and we felt like we could really get along. So I wasn't thinking so hard that like I must be a product manager, forever. I think it was really still going back to the principle of like this amazing bunch of people. They're really, really passionate about what they want to bring to the world. So Peatix is a company that's kind of started because in Japan, as you know, there was a lot of problems after the tsunami hits, and it changed a lot of minds of Japanese of what to think about, look for in life. And lots of people actually embrace events. I think it's the same with Meetup. I almost forgot the name. Meetup was formed actually in the shadows of 9/11. So very similar founding stories of trying to bring people together to heal, like after
Tragic
a bad
event.
event, and helping people figure out like what matters in life. So I found that really powerful. Emmy is another superhuman, that I managed to work with. She has many great skills as well. So I think that's kind of how I went into that. It wasn't a deliberate like, let me look for my next product gig, but let me see what I can learn from a bunch of people. Yeah.
That's a very interesting way of thinking about it. I mean, I'll probably share a bit from my own lens, right? Like when I joined product management, very similar to you. My family was asking, why would you join this kind of company? I came from the bank, this was saying, hey, there was stable job, why, and all that. So that I think is similar. But I guess for me, like one of the things that I've always believed was that, in order for me to grow in my craft as a product person, I needed to be as immersed as possible. So for me, the thought of actually joining another organization, not as a product person, almost never even came into the conversation. So I think your thought process of, oh, for you, it's okay. What is interesting and where do you feel you can make an impact is really, really a very nice a different way of thinking. Yeah, and I think it has served you well. So yeah, for viewers and listeners on the show, right? Like we always say, there's no one rule or one way to succeed in product management, and you do where you think you will succeed. And I think that in Fabian's case, as you can see, it's been amazing for him, right? So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
So yeah, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
I would even say that now with the benefit of hindsight, looking back, I can actually now, but not at that point out to things that I learned while not being directly on the product side. I mean, I did help out with the product, but I wasn't directly on it. Is that it actually helps me build empathy for my internal customers. So, for example, I was kind of doing BD and sales. I was requesting for product features from Singapore when the mothership is in Japan and the company was growing in the United States. So Singapore obviously being much smaller market relative to this too. Being in this shoe, I would say then later on going back to kind of regional HQ product, like managing the roadmap, I think gave me some empathy, but also credibility, right, with the people I work with later on by telling them that, hey, I was in your shoes once. I mean, the true story was I was once demoing our product live, and then I think our server went down, and it was an important client. So, I mean, things happen, right? If you're in the tech scene, you know that things happen. Even AWS goes down, right? So, um, things happen. But just being able to tell someone from BD that I know how you feel, right, when you meet your important clients because I've been there. I think it really helps.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, right? Having worked in, small early stage startups as well, you find yourself doing things that, like some people would deem these are non-product roles, like you're learning how to like send EDMs via MailChimp and things like that. But you realize you learn a lot. And I think the more important part, as you say, you learn the empathy, right? When you have to support sales calls, and then you realize that, oh my gosh, we're deploying at a time where they're doing a presentation, like you say, right? It's like don't do that, and things like that. And the feeling of not being able to get the outcome that you want because you're dependent on somebody else. Yeah, I think that really teaches you a lot, especially when you then, lead your own product team. You kind of want to teach them that it's not about this whole mindset of, product is the boss and therefore, everybody else has to listen to you, but it's really understanding and really a lot of empathy. So thank you for sharing that. That was nugget right there. Nuggets, folks, nuggets. All right, let's move on to that, because I still have lots and lots of things that I want to learn from your career, right? You went into Shopee and also at Grab. So I'm kind of going to be going back and forth between these two companies, because I think conceptually there were a lot of similarities, even though they were in different industries, right? So I guess the first question is, you joined Shopee, where at that time you're in this pressure cooker environment because your eternal enemy Lazada is always breathing down your neck. So that's like this super competition that's happening. Then at Grab, it was, with Uber as well. So for you, when you were there, right, did that competition, or was there a pressure because of the competition from a product perspective?
Mm. I would I guess I'm gonna I'm gonna say no, and it's kind of different reasons for the different companies.
Mm,
For Shopee, I was there pretty much at the start, right at the start, and the I think the interesting thing was, and still is, I think how long term and ambitious, incredibly ambitious, the team at C Group is, right? The founders of C Group, how and some of the key people who join later on, how incredibly ambitious it is. So from day one, the target is to be the biggest in Southeast Asia. Like, never mind that Lazada has been around for a while. Never mind that it's a very competitive space. So I think, in a certain sense, I really didn't feel within the company that we were benchmarking Lazada at all, because the goal wasn't like to beat Lazada. The goal was to be incredibly big. So it felt more like we were trying to trace a curve of the likes of Amazon or Taobao, and the real competition might be the offline commerce, not so much like whoever is already online and trying to fight with them for a slice of the existing pie, but to grow it much bigger, right? And I think with this mindset, with like something maybe borrowed from Amazon will be to be very centric on the customer, on the consumer, because you want to grow and change the habits. That's what you have to do. And then I think with Taobao, there was a lot of learning of very hands-on, very detailed execution. The CEO was essentially in Jakarta. The COO and the CMO at the point of time were in Bangkok, right? So being on the ground to really try to win over some of these markets. So definitely, I would say very limited sense in Shopee that of being very competitor focused. I think if there's any name, it would be actually more of companies like Tokopedia, because it is a journey of understanding how you can move consumers online. And I would say that at that point, when we look out and see who was doing a fantastic job, it was Tokopedia, actually, being very local, being very hands-on in execution. I would say it was Tokopedia.
Okay. And do you think that because there wasn't that pressure of, so and so is doing this, so and so is growing at this speed, and therefore, you guys are pressured into trying to follow up? Do you think that helped the product evolve? Or do you think that, I mean, of course, now I'm asking you in hindsight, lah, so maybe things are different now. But or do you think that having a little bit more of that pressure would have made things, I don't know, better, worse?
Yeah. I would say actually, depends on how one thinks about it. I guess working at Shopee can be considered a pressure environment, but the pressure doesn't come from competitors, but come from the goals that we set for ourselves. I think from the start, you see all these hockey stick charts. They are like, these are our targets. But the amazing thing being at Shopee is that we were actually following that curve. Like, it looks unreal, but it was real. Of course, spending a lot of money in subsidy, I think people know that. But I would actually, looking back, kind of see that the Shopee product management environment was reminded me a little bit of my days at MIT, actually. I would say that everyone knows that there's very high standards. You're surrounded by smart people, competitive, hardworking, no bullshit. I think at Shopee is essentially somewhere where you have nowhere to hide. If you don't know your stuff, it's very, very clear. Things move very fast. I think one of the values, company values, sometimes you are cynical about it, but one of the values of back then Garena and now C Group is you run. And actually, you literally see people physically running in the office, which is a bit insane. So you could take it cynically, but I would take it positively. So, for example, I was working on a design with one of my senior designers and presenting it to my boss, who's Chris Feng, the CEO of Shopee. And my designer started. We had to make many designs. So my designer named it alphabetically, right? So design underscore A, and we actually got to Z. So we actually got to mythic designs, and we weren't done yet, right? So I think because she was like, what should I name it now, right? Like, should I name it like Z1? I don't. But the key thing was that I think this designer had no complaints. I didn't really have a complaint. We were just a little bit at a loss of like, what more variations can we create, right? If this is still not there yet. But there wasn't a sense where pushing hard is a problem. We understand, right? We're just trying to get the best thing. If it takes the 27th iteration and 30th iteration, we'll do it, right? It makes sense. So I think that was one. Lots of pressure, but maybe pressure in a different way. Yeah.
Okay, so the internal pressure came from trying to hit the targets, or the heights that the company wants to be at or wanted to be at. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say, and again, I think now by now it's kind of uh, well known, regardless of how the company likes to package it. There's a lot of people who were originally from mainland China, or more recently moved from mainland China as a big development team in China. So the company doesn't want to present itself because then you get your app suspended in India. But I think that at least was the situation, and I would say the benefit of coming from a tech ecosystem that is a lot more mature is that you look at Shopee and you think of Taobao and you think that, hey, Shopee is really weak, right? It's really an infant, right? We could go so much further, right? Look at where Taobao is. Look at where JD, where Jingdong is, and so I think it is more like these things that was pushing it, right? When we launched our first few, 99 shopping day, people were like complaining. They were like, "Oh, they're good deals, but it's really not like Double 11. It's not like Singles Day." So I think that benchmark was psychologically in people's heads, and in a way, I would say that really helped. And so for me, it was also trying to catch up to that. I didn't know e-commerce really. I don't know if ticketing is considered e-commerce, but not the same kind of marketplace, B2B to C kind of e-commerce. So I had to really learn and catch up. And one of the things I did was I just tried to download as many, because the China ecosystem is that there's no Apple or Google App Store. So everyone does APK. You can, with an Android phone, you can pretty much download everything. So I think I downloaded like, I don't know, 400 or 500 apps to just like play around with them, benchmark them. And part of the reason I remember is that I don't know if there's anything funny installed in any of these 400 apps, but my Samsung, can't remember the model, like it was a pretty high-end model for a Samsung, was basically like heating up. Later on, they had this whole battery fire issue. But at a point, I was like, maybe I downloaded too many and ran too many. But I think it was, again, that connection with the MIT analogy was very much like drinking from a fire hose, like trying to catch up to all these people where that understanding of mature Chinese apps was just native. They use it every day. But for me, I have to kind of download it into my brain.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
And I was like managing them, so I had to supposedly know more than them. So
Okay, actually, on a slightly tangential question, right? Do you feel that that is something that needs to happen for anyone in product, that you need to know more than the rest of your team, just so that either is it to win respect, or is it to make sure that you're bring your A game to the table?
yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, actually, this is a conversation I recently had with one of my PMs. So I don't think I should be the smartest person in the room. I think I really believe in hiring and working with people who are smarter and being more capable than me, pushing me hard. So I think it's less about I really need to know more than them, but I'm using that to drive myself, to say that I want to have a very rigorous debate with them. So one of the debates I once had with my boss at Shopee back then was to archive a message, should you swipe from left to right or right to left? It's a very small point, but I think being able to build that library in your head of saying that, hey, what does this UI UX mean to most people, and where's the backing for it? It helps. I think it's just kind of, you should build that foundation. But as to whether you can ever be always smarter than or more knowledgeable than the people you manage, I think the answer should be no. I think right now and at many points in my career, I've consistently managed, including at Shopee, right? I downloaded 400 apps and compared them, but there's this PM in the group who, I think her superpower is exactly that, right? You could say like, okay, we're thinking of live streaming. She goes to look at like 20 live streaming places, and she synthesizes it in her brain, and she gives you like the executive download. I have not seen anybody other than her who can really do that well, and I'm not as good as her in this respect. Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Thanks for sharing. If we have time, we might come back to this whole topic of being the smartest person in the room and all that. But for now, I kind of want to leave the Shopee conversation, but one very curious question to ask. So one of the USPs about Shopee, which really made a big splash at the time, or I mean these days not so much already, was the free shipping
Yeah.
model, right? I'm very curious, how did that idea come about to say, hey, we're just going to take the losses on the shipping, and then really try to gain market share through that. I'm very curious from a product lens whether there's anything that you could share about how that came about.
Mm.
I mean, if you don't know, it's fine. I'm just
Yeah. I can first share, like, I think the starting point of it. The starting point of it is really like user acquisition and marketing. And as we all know, free is powerful. Amazon has done that. In China, it's the same situation. I think if you look over at India and Flipkart, I'm sure it's kind of pretty standard model. I think the challenge for Shopee is really in that the infrastructure was problematic. I don't know if problematic is the right word, or was just growing, right? Like, some of the bigger logistics players today, like Ninja, JNT, I think were growing at the same time as Shopee, going together with Shopee. So I don't think, I mean, of course, there's the unit economics and financials challenge. There's one end of it. But the second is like, even if that works, can you really support that volume? So one of the things, and for example, we were in Taiwan as well. So one of the things that happens in Taiwan is that your packages get shipped to a convenience store mostly, and people pick it up. We actually got lots of complaints from the convenience stores because packages were overflowing from their designated cabinet to put the packages. So I think the challenge is really like trying to like load balance between the delivery partners. I mean, that's one of the challenges. Integrate with more of them. They doing the development on their end, and the physical world logistics network making it work. I think that was the hard part. But in terms of how much customers love them, I think there's very little doubt. That should be the central part of the marketing message.
Okay. So since you're talking about how it began, right? So was it the thinking that, hey, at this point in time we want to really focus on acquisition, and therefore the financial side of it we can sort of absorb whatever costs or overheads that come with it, and then we would go. I'm just trying to understand this because from a product perspective, this would be one of the very curious use cases, right? This eternal topic between whether you want to put your acquisition first, or whether it is the financials that you want to put first in terms of your overheads.
Well, I think from a product lens, it's really and I think there are similar situation in a company like Grab, which is you are in a competitive market. You need marketing and user acquisition. How you should approach it as product. I think the word that comes to my mind is really about flexibility, because let's say Shopee started from unconditional free shipping, but you cannot do that because we actually have fraud where people use Shopee to move house, right? They use the Shopee free shipping, they list as a seller, and they buy it themselves so that Shopee will move it for them. So you need to start having controls.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, fraud is another super interesting topic, but you need to start having controls like, are you a new user? What's your basket size? Is this shop in the mall? Is it a preferred seller? So from the product perspective, what it means is that all these restrictions start to come in, and you need to be able to give your acquisition marketing, whoever is managing the budget, to be very agile in managing this free thing, right? What exactly is free? At the same time, for the consumer to understand what is that free, right? So they don't feel cheated, right? They don't feel like I thought it was unconditional. I mean, at least these days, it's very with the
Conditions.
current world, it's very hard to be unconditionally completely free. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I can definitely empathize, when I was working at Photobook, one of the things that we had to do was always that last mile, and working with the logistics companies who dealt with that, and I still remember it was our VP of customer success who deal with these last mile logistics and how to integrate and what were the issues, those. So that brings back memories. So okay, thank you for bringing back some interesting memories in my head. Okay, so let's move on to another topic. Again, very pertinent to your time at both. Actually might even be pertinent to currently at Line is, when you are leading or being part of a product function in a regional product. One of the difficult parts is always trying to get alignment, right? Because you've got teams all over the place. Actually, more importantly, your customer base is in multiple locations, but you are usually trying to build this one app. And how do you do alignment? How do you do prioritization in that case? How has it worked for you in your experience?
Yeah. I mean, so I would say, I mean, Grab is a good example from maybe externally having a marketing message as super app, like maybe it sounds good, but from product management lens, it is a challenge. It means that multiple business verticals are, there's an opportunity cost, right? If you showcase ride hailing, how about food delivery? If you showcase food delivery, how about marts and so on? That's one on top of the regional, right? So I think this matrix of business lines and countries is particularly interesting, right? And not necessarily having, like, if you compare to maybe American companies, Chinese companies, Indian companies, they have a huge domestic market. So it's a less of a need to do that. So I would say that ultimately how Grab and how I've learned from Grab as well and how to do this is really to focus on the impact, right? Focus on getting to understanding which is the most impactful for the whole company. I think some parts are a bit easier, like if you can really convert it into a dollar value, that is actually not so hard and not so hard to convince everyone, right? So if you go to I won't say a country, but if you go to a smaller country in your group and say that, hey, Indonesia has this number more users than you, and we do this for them, so you get this value, I think people can understand. The difficult part is actually understanding the more qualitative stuff. And I think that's the other thing I really learned at Grab, which was to be, to be on the ground a lot more, talking to users, talking to customers, trying to understand the business, understand why is it something that in a spreadsheet formula may not make sense, but makes sense on the ground, right? So combining this kind of user research together with the quantitative stuff and trying to get them to a prioritization, socializing this with people. I think maybe soft skills as well. Like for me, being at Shopee where I don't know how to put it, but being at Shopee where it's like maybe it's a bit more top down, maybe a bit more top down and Grab where it's a lot more democratic and views can come from anywhere. Understanding how to get early buy-in was very valuable for me to learn.
Okay, so that's fantastic. So let me push this topic just a little bit more, because I've heard this topic come up many times in Southeast Asia, and you're right, in some other markets, like let's say for let's say China is a good example, right? Their domestic market is huge, the opportunity size is huge, so it is possible for them to only focus on one country or one type of demographic before they move on. Whereas usually for Southeast Asia, because especially if you want to grow into a super app or into a unicorn, you kind of have to go into multiple countries in Southeast Asia, or at least, like, at the very least it'd be two or three, right? So At one point, on one hand, sorry, you were saying, yeah, you might have to go to one of the smaller countries and go, hey, the biggest country needs this, right? So two questions. So I'll just tell you one at a time first, lah. So then the first question is, how does that how does that translate into whatever road mapping or prioritization exercise that happens. And maybe I don't understand the structure, in which, of course, please enlighten all of us, like how the structure is, because usually from what I've seen, the product teams are usually quite regional. So they don't have like a Indonesia team or something like that. Or even if they do, they still end up going back into the same app. So I'm just very curious about how that prioritization happens.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that at the end of the day, one of the goals of a regional player is efficiency, right? Economies of scale, of not actually building every single small feature for every market out there, but trying to figure out which is the highest ROI features to build on, I don't know, when I say average, median, I don't know, just to drive the whole region or company forward, could come at the expense of some of those countries. I mean, I would say there's lots of processes to try to get that feedback, be it like we have product operations roles in the different countries to give that feedback, to prioritize each country's requests, so that during the road mapping process, right, to come up with a list of requests and say this is top request, to try to band together, a few countries that have similar requirements. So in the end, figuring out creative ways to get the request into the roadmap. I think ultimately for each team in the regional team though, it's still back to that focus on impact and having a theme. So the theme, I mean, I don't think I should share specific themes, but let's say the theme is growth or the theme is profitability,
Yes,
and associated numbers, to really look at all those things, including requests that came from countries, to see which one makes sense. I think that is a process that's trying to make it work. I would say that the real magic that makes it work at Grab, I mean, given the complexity, I mean, some people still say it doesn't work, but I would say it worked. Given the complexity is working, are not necessarily just regional, but like between the different business verticals. Two things. So one is that there's a role called the technical program manager, TPM. I think a little bit of an unsung hero in an organization like Grab, a model that's borrowed from Amazon and Google, where some of the folks who came from there brought that knowledge with them. It's really a role that is a bit hard to define, but they are kind of I would say they're like process masters. So you could have a process, right, that tries to collect feedback, but if you just run through it, it may not work, right? So they are there optimizing every step to make sure information flows, processes do what they intended. I'm not doing this role justice, but there's a role where there are people who are making all these processes work, not just in the hard way like timeline, but in the soft way, right? Trying to run retrospectives, trying to run sessions where there's more psychological safety for people to debate these issues. Like, I'm a small country, I've been requesting this forever, and nothing comes back to me, right? Being able to say that and try to push for that. So I think that's one. I would say the second is leveraging strategy. So one of the things I practiced a lot more at Grab was also like formulating a strategy with lots of stakeholder feedback and pushing that for like 2 years. And when you have a long timeline, a high level vision, people then know how they can make a request that fits into this vision, rather than like the tactical pieces may not fit in, right? If they request something is small, when it stands alone, it cannot fit in. But when they know your bigger picture, right, and they say that, okay, let's say, well, this is a real one. So we were trying to increase the income of drivers through ways other than the fares and fees they get from giving a ride or delivering food. So something like tipping, which on its own may not be so highly prioritized, but tipping would then make a lot of sense if your strategy is to try to increase income from outside of fares and fees, because users are just not happy to pay that much. You know, in the world of free shipping, free delivery, that's not where I want to pay. But tipping is kind of, you're happy, you know, it's performance based. You're happy the service you got, please tip. It all goes to the driver. So for people to understand the bigger context and connect to the context, I think that was the second thing that worked.
Okay. So still gonna go down the same path because I told you there were two questions, right? So that was the first part. Second part is, how do you make sure that when you're doing this, right? Because again, I'm just hammering home the uniqueness that is Southeast Asia, because it's like you've correctly mentioned, it's not just countries or markets, right? It's also verticals that sort of, there's always this trying to get everything to work together. How do you make sure that you're not just building the lowest common denominator stuff, right? Like you say, right? The easiest one to do is just look everything from an ROI lens. And the slight difficulty with that, or the challenge with that, is always the market with the biggest user base, or the one that's bringing the most revenue, is always going to be the one that sort of wins that argument. And of course, we also know that, in any given point in time for a product, you can't always just do these lower common denominators, right? Some of them have to be delighters and some of them have to be functional. That's kind of solve a problem, but don't necessarily bring in revenue. How do you do that now, even at your current place?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think two parts to the answer. I think other than TPM, having a great TPMs and strategy, I think what works for Grab, one is experimentation, right? Breaking ties or debates using data. I think that's something that works well. But everything has its costs, or everything has the potential to be a double-edged sword. So I think the downside of experimentation in Grab is maybe sometimes some things don't need an experiment. You just should have enough conviction and ready to go ahead with it. But that's I would say typically the downside of experimentation driven culture. And I would say the second, which is a little bit of a different angle to it, is, and related to the strategy, is that I do think there's a certain culture of storytelling at Grab where people can come along with you if you manage to convince them with a story. And the story can be built on anecdotes from customers rather than always needing that. All right. I mean, as you mentioned, that delighters, right? I think that's where that on the ground piece comes from. I think that's for Grab. I mean, in my current company, the difference is that we are one country, so there isn't as much the debate of like which country should we prioritize. So there isn't that situation. But I think with any company, there's always a challenge of how you prioritize that roadmap. And I would say that, then again, it really goes back to the can you accumulate and build things into a bigger thing over time? So that's strategy, right? Instead of building disparate pieces, other pieces that you're building, eventually connecting, accumulating to something big. And that means you have to work backwards. So you have a vision and you work back from it, not you work forward and you like experiment. Oh, it works. You have to experiment, but you're experimenting towards something. Yeah, a higher purpose. So I would say that really is the key of not doing fragmented stuff. Like even they look fragmented, if you have that clear vision of how they will connect together in the end, I think that's the way. That's the way to experiment forward.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Again, it's always interesting to hear because your experience wasn't just at Grab, which is like now unicorn, but you also at Shopee, which is like the e-commerce platform. So understanding how things work on the inside from a product perspective, I think is always very enlightening. So yes. Okay, let's move on a little bit to where you currently are at as well. So currently you are at Lineman. Is it Lineman or Lineman? Actually, I just realized.
Line man, like
Okay.
man, woman, man.
Um, It's a company or an organization based out of Thailand, as I understand it, and you just mentioned it's a one market product.
Yeah.
What made you decide to join them? Like, was there like, yeah, what was the push factor or what was the pull factor for you?
Hmm. I would say that I mean it's still back to I think I have a strong internal compass of what would attract me. I mean, with LinkedIn, you get recruiters reaching out to you
Sure.
um, all the time, and I would say I just ignore them. Not to be rude to recruiters,
Sorry,
but
LinkedIn, you suck.
no, no, I don't want to waste people's time. So I know that they have better leads, which is not me. So I don't respond. And I think what really I look for one is still back to the founder led. So Lyman Wongnai, a lot of the management team have been, some of them started Wongnai, been with Wongnai for 10 years. I believe that if you can continue driving a company for that long, your passion and your passion is still there, right? That's one thing that I look out for. The second is that it's driven by a mission that I believe in. So for me, um, in part for personal reasons, I think I really believe in supporting economic mobility. And I think that's what maybe really happy actually at both Shopee and Grab that I could see this small merchants or drivers growing their businesses into much bigger things, coming from unemployment to gain employment. And with Lyman Wongnai, I think there's even more because Thailand actually is a country of long tail merchants. I think lots of people who travel to Thailand will see that like in every corner, people are starting their small businesses.
Yeah.
Lots of street vendors, street stores. In residential area, people set up shop in front of their homes. So I would say that it is a country where, since I'm interested in helping people grow economically, it is a country where you could do that. So I think that's at a high level. And then to the more specifics, I would say that I met the people, and I think it even goes back to the time, let's say at Viki, right? And when you meet certain people who are special, you can feel it. I felt it. I felt like there was something in the management team. There was something in the product team that I met where that it feels like there's just a great uh, company culture. There's a bunch of people who are trying to do something, for their country. Back to this, product management. Everyone knows each other in Southeast Asia. Story. I think back then in Singapore, it was literally you would know the like 10 product managers that are out there. I think today the good news for Singapore is that it's matured so much that I'm really sure I don't know a lot of the product managers. But that's a good sign for Singapore. I think Thailand is still a little bit at that phase where this is a company that's, you know, it will in the future be like the Alibaba and Tencent in terms of grooming talent, or like in terms of like be the Flipkart in India of grooming talents for the ecosystem. Right now, I would say still kind of early days for tech scene in Thailand. I mean, you can look at Lyman Wongnai, you can look at Agoda. There aren't. I mean, there are more companies than this to be clear, but it's not yet at the extent of Singapore. The product management field is not there yet. And to me, having a bunch of people who want to do something like that, right? The product folks in the company want to create something like that. Create a company where you're Thai, you can work here, you can build a tech company for your country. I think that's something that's powerful, even though I'm not Thai, clearly. It is something that moves me.
Okay. Interesting. There's something that you mentioned, and I was hoping that it would come up again, and it has come up at the most perfect timing, right? Was you mentioned that one of the things that attracted you was when you met I believe it was the founders of Lion Man, that you felt they were special, right? And you mentioned before that one of the things that sort of pulls at you, there's a pull factor for you, is founder-led organizations. So one of the things that has come up before in some of the other episodes that I've done is this I don't know whether it's tension or whatever you want to call it, between founder-led and product-led organizations. What are your thoughts on this, given that, it's very interesting that you feel pulled to founder-led organizations?
Yeah. Well, since it's an uncensored show, I will offer my controversial and non-politically correct answer. I really don't personally give a damn about this product-led thing. I think it's a false like theoretical ideal that some people are like trying to push for, and it kind of gives people the wrong perception of how a company should be run, right? I mean, at least maybe in the current climate, especially where the whole investors and financial markets are kind of saying that, hey, um, you need to be able to be financially sustainable, highly profitable. I I don't know, because a lot of times the manifestation of product led ends up being like people thinking that you're left alone to build a metaverse product, you know. But really, what I think it should be is great collaboration, right? You need all the parties to come together. You don't go to marketing or operations and say, "I know better than you. I'm going to build this. Like, leave me to this." But you need to, yeah, I think product led tends to conjure that. But what I think there should be, though, it doesn't mean that I believe that therefore the business team should come up with a roadmap and give product team the solutions and let you build it. What it should be, as I mentioned, is a collaboration, right? You bring me your problems, you can suggest solutions, right? I think one problem with this product led movement is that some people will just start telling their business stakeholders, do not give me any solutions. But maybe there are good solutions there. You know, like you're like eliminating a valuable source of information when you shouldn't. But what it really is about is like building trust, right? Building trust. I think it's more like collaboration, making sure the org has trust in product. So I see that at Lyman Wongnai, right? That the founders, the CEO has trust in product. I mean, he questions hard, but has that trust in product that, hey, well, I hired some professionals here, right? You can deliver the roadmap for me. That makes sense. Having that trust, having that collaboration, having deep and maybe difficult discussions is what's important. So I think using terms like product led tends to lead it to a cultural war. And maybe what I meant by founder led, if I try to break it down, I think it's more of it is still pursuing something grand, something ambitious, that it wants to be something much bigger than it is today, rather than I want to meet what the investors want the next quarter. I think there is a difference in the mode you're operating, and I think the overall atmosphere and mood in the company is also different, right? When you feel like and you know, having been through all this cycles, including, let's say, sorry again, uncensored, right? So
Yes.
you know, seeing the transition from Viki to Rakuten Viki, right? You are really a different animal when Rakuten was at Rakuten in front of Viki, and you know, with, let's say, Rasmik not being at the helm, you know, the two Korean co-founders not being at the helm, I think it does affect in terms of where you're trying to push. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that it's a bad place to work. It's just not for me. I think that's what I'm saying, right? That's what I can't I can't do. Yeah.
Okay. Again, coming back to what you've mentioned about founder-led, and I think one of the things that I was very interested in what you were saying was, you were saying that there's a difference between building like what the founder sees as the vision versus, what your stakeholders want. I think you mentioned something along those lines,
I
right?
mentioned what investors want for next
Investors,
quarter.
yes, that was the word
Yeah.
I'm looking for.
Some
Investors.
stakeholders probably want it for the next week, but yeah.
That's true. That's true. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So then the interesting is that because even for linemen, for example, they have received funding, right?
Yes.
So in that sense, the founder isn't exactly free as well. So what is the difference then for a company that is having funding but is still founder-led versus a company that isn't necessarily founder-led anymore. Let's see, like you used the example of Viki, but still has funding.
Maybe the line isn't between well, you're right. Well, first of all, you're right. Everyone has a boss, right? Even investors have a boss, I don't know, public market, their own source of funds. Everyone has a boss. That's the truth. I'm not saying that I only work with people who have no bosses themselves. Everyone has a boss.
If you do find that, please let me know. I also want to join.
I think it is, the line isn't so much between public and private. I think if you look at, easy example, if you look at Elon Musk or Steve Jobs in the past, the line isn't between public and private, I would say. So maybe that's not where the line is. I think the line is still in. And if you look at C Group, for example, where I would say for a long time, even if you look at their earnings call, what they say on it, like they don't really seem to care about the public market. And they push to expand to like Poland, France, India. So those actions do not necessarily match with what investors want in the next quarter. So I don't really think that it's but I mean now it's much harder. Yeah. But I don't think the line is between public and private. I think the line is between maybe whether the founders the founders vision is still intact, and whether they can push for it and over a longer period of time. So I would say right now the current climate is pretty hard for anyone. Unless you're like a cash printing machine like Facebook, maybe you can still say, I don't care, I'm still going to build it. Well, even Facebook, I think
anything that ends with a .ai, So.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for me it's still more like looking to see if that spirit is strong, and that push, that ambition, that's something I love. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think good points you bring up. I just wanted to understand from your perspective, what is your understanding of, founder-led and how that works. Okay. A few, I think, questions that I still have, because, again, this is really interesting. So you've joined a company which is based in Thailand. As you say, it's a one market product. And you've correctly mentioned that you are not Thai, right? How do you acclimatize, or how, and first of all, how do you acclimatize personally? And secondly, how do you adapt culturally as well? I don't know, maybe you can correct me if, let's say, the majority of the lineman team is not Thai. But yeah, I would love to hear and understand.
Yeah. I don't know what's the percentage, but everyone is Thai, essentially. Almost everyone is Thai. And maybe before I get into like how I acclimatize and get used to it, definitely there's some adjustments that are needed. I think my overall view is actually more of, I, in a way, like being an outsider. I think I've been an outsider in many points in my life. When I was my first job at Singapore Airlines, I really wanted to be in a startup, but I was working in Singapore Airlines. It's quite a difficult situation. So, but I still tried to push in an immature way, I would say, try to push for change there. But I think being an outsider and not believing in climbing the corporate ladder, which is what a corporate company believes you should believe in, did teach me things, mistakes I made, things I did right. So I think along the way, right, really being an outsider at Shopee, almost everyone has a stronger connection to mainland China. I was speaking Mandarin 80% of the time. Taught me something, good practice for Chinese. My Mandarin is much better now. And I think it will be the same here. I think the value I bring in is actually being able to see. The analogy is that if you are a fish, you don't see water. You're surrounded by it. So it's in a way actually not easy for Thai people to see what is Thai about Lyman Wongnai. But as an outsider, I can point it out to them and say, hey, actually, this is what is Thai about you. This is what is Thai about a company. And we can use, leverage or go down this direction of delighting customers because this is what they would identify as something that's purpose built for them. And I think it's actually harder for a Thai person to see it because it's too obvious. It's not so obvious to me. It's obvious like water until they don't see it anymore, but I can see it. So I think that's the outsider part.
Okay.
Acclimatizing, I actually took intensive Thai classes, but my Thai, after a while, I realized that the company hired me for my product skills, not my Thai skills. But
It's
I
good
would
to know,
say,
right?
yeah, I would still say it's back to a certain personal thing where I like learning about culture. I like this cross cultural, just like Viki, right? Content. I was watching like Turkish content when I was working at Viki. Very different, similar and different in different ways. So I like this crossing cultural barriers. I've been to lots of social events where like everyone's speaking Thai and now and then someone translate for me or some people come and chat with me. And I would say I feel comfortable. I think it's also a great bunch of people to work with that's what makes it comfortable as well. It takes effort, so I think I made special effort. Thai is very tonal. I still make mistakes, but I make special effort to learn how to pronounce everyone's names properly, to understand, where are they from, what do they care about in life, where do they want to go, and help them get there. So I think things like that help. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the sort of bridging that sort of cultural gap between you and your team? I think that's the other thing that's interesting for me as well to know.
I would say for the product function in Lime and Wongnai right now, maybe one of the challenges is a bit more of um, and I think this is true of because of the earlier stage of a tech company, just having product folks who would, back to the product led thing, would really be very confident and try to like push for certain things. I think it takes a bit of time and effort to coach everyone to say like this is where you should be confident and this is where you should listen. And I think that's not I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but it is something that I find. Maybe let's say if I contrast with, let's say, China, where a lot of PMs from Shopee were from, and India, where a lot of PMs from Grab were from. And I think China and India being countries where the population is insane in number, and if you don't fight for yourself, no one's going to do it for you. And I think in contrast, Thailand is is a country where there isn't, there is competition, don't get me wrong. It's not like walk in a park that you get to great universities in Thailand or you find success. It is difficult, but I think it's not as intense. The culture isn't one where it focuses so much on individual achievement. So I would say that cultural gap where the focus is on collective achievement, maybe a bit more, or collective well-being, and all that. I think it takes a little bit of a different motivation and coaching to tell people to coach people to say that this is where you should step up. If you think is right, just push all the way. But this is also where you maybe, listen to your business stakeholders. They have very good feedback here. Yeah.
It's okay. It sounds like there is a cultural, but there's also partially again, I'm venturing out here, so correct me if I'm wrong. It also sounds like there is a maturity, a product maturity part of that as well, right? Because I do sort of I can relate, and even though I've never worked in Thailand, where for product folks who are slightly younger or less mature in terms of their experience within product, I seem to also have to do the same kind, right? There are certain times where you're confident and yeah, you should go all out for it, but then there are other times when you got to understand when to sort of pull back and just be the person that's listening versus the person that's trying to drive everything. So I don't know whether you find that it is both a cultural and maturity thing, or is it in your case more just cultural?
I think a bit of both. Yeah, I think there's cultural. That's not like China, India, where like just push for yourself. I'm I am stereotyping two whole countries people.
No, but
But
okay, yeah,
right.
but in the spirit of this being the product uncensored show, I think for a large part of it, it is true, right? I do find that people from, leaders who come from these countries are very confident and they're able to really drive for what they want. So you're right. So there's it's not one stroke fits all, but in general, yeah, that seems to be the case.
Yeah, as for I think the maturity thing, I think it is, right? So it's kind of like maybe in my mind it's kind of like, oh, this superhero has a superpower, but they don't know how to control it yet, right? So either it comes out too much or it comes out too little. And the only way is practice. So I think that's where the mental model is really coaching. Like people just have to try for themselves and along the way make mistakes, push too hard, that's fine. As long as you learn from it, we move on. The next time you know where the limit is or where, what's the degree to which you should let up this thing. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right. I would again, as usual, always find that there's never enough time, but we need to move on. As you said in a different context. But yeah, thanks for all of this. So we will go to the last segment, which is actually the interesting part, which I always find interesting, which is the song. And would you like to tell our listeners and viewers what song you decided to choose and why?
Yeah, sure. So I chose a song. The song title is Hip Hop Saved My Life. It's by Lupe Fiasco. Why did I choose the song? I mean, many different reasons. I think I like hip hop because I like words. I like reading. I like writing. I like music, and hip hop is kind of the two together. Um, and the lyrics are great, right? So then, no, the lyrics, the beats, the whole song is great. And I think the second thing is I always felt like I was a little bit of an outsider, as I mentioned, kind of enjoy being an outsider. And in a way, hip hop music is all about being an outsider, right? About I want to buy a Cadillac, or I finally bought a Cadillac. Like there's a lot of this outsider insider thing going on in hip hop, which is interesting to me. And maybe the relating more back to this show is more like I think in a way I can say product management saved my life. Maybe it's a bit too much, too strong, but it's not far from it. I think for someone like me who I enjoy like being kind of breaking the rules in a way, but yet bringing people together. I enjoy interdisciplinary. Recently, my wife told me that she suspects I might be ADHD. Being a little bit ADHD, I think there is really hard to find a job that will really satisfy the curiosity I have, like the passion I have for things. So I think in a way, product management saved my life.
Okay, very nice. I like that. I like that. Curious question about the song, right? Because this song I think came out 2008 thereabouts, 2010 or something like that, right? Is there a reason that sorry, let me rephrase this.
Sure.
Do you prefer the hip hop that came from that era, or is it just because you really like that song? Because I also know that within the hip hop scene, right, there's this like, that time of hip hop was better than now, which is, more superficial,
Yeah.
la di da.
Well, I guess in a way, the choice of Lupe Fiasco is kind of like, yeah, I mean, he's always making fun of people being too commercial. So there's the angle, so for example, I'm into watches, for example, but
Okay.
I will never buy a Rolex, right? It's like every watches to some people just means Rolex, but I just can't deal with mainstream in a way, or what I perceive as mainstream. So yes, I think the choice of Lupe Fiasco has a bit of this not mainstream, but maybe more generally, yeah, I guess there's also a contradiction there. I don't know. I think if you enjoy music, that's fine. If you like Rolex, that's fine. I think there's two strains of it. One is that I don't want to be the mainstream person, but I think everyone should be able to lead their own lives and have their own choices. So you like Rolex, good for you. You like Kanye West good for you?
Oh, shots fired. Okay, okay. All right. All right. Thank you so much, Fabian.
Hmm.
You know, it's been a really enlightening conversation. And as usual, you know, as with all my other guests as well, there's so much to absorb, so much to learn. And really appreciate you taking the time, especially given that, you know, this podcast and vodcast is really long form. Um, as we close, is there anything that you would like, you know, a thought or a, you know, a challenge or some nugget of wisdom that you would like to leave with our listeners and our viewers?
Hmm. I think this relates to a conversation I had with one of my more junior product managers recently, or just in general, some junior product managers. I feel there's a high level of anxiety of achieving success quickly, right? Like I want to be a great PM really quickly and be able to do everything perfectly. So I think my advice there is that yeah, maybe for if you look at older people like me, you see like success. It looks easy. It looks like the analogy of a swan, like I'm just gliding on the water. But in knowing the analogy, you know that the swan is paddling furiously beneath the surface. So I think I would just say like tons of hard work got me here. And for any product leader you see out there that looks like they have it easy, trust me, a lot of it wasn't easy for them. Either they work hard for it. So if you're working hard now, and you don't yet see that progress, I just would say that it happened for everyone, right? It's only when you look back a couple of years later that you will see that, oh, this is what it taught me, right? This is what this pain or this effort taught me. And so don't be discouraged by it. Ambition takes a little bit of patience and time as well. Yeah.
Mm, that is super, super nice advice from Fabian. And I concur with this. You know, one of the feedback that I once gave one of my more junior PMs as well is like, you know, sometimes you want to get to where you're going, like, you know, like right now, but you just have to simmer in the discomfort of your current state for a while until, you know, you're ready to move on to the next
Yeah.
step. So
It's a marinade.
yeah, you need to marinate a little bit, right? Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you so much, Fabian.
You.
And we have actually come to the end of our show. It has been a really good show, and you know, one of the things that you know, I started this show during the pandemic, and I wasn't sure whether it would ever last more than a couple of episodes, right? And here we are. I think we're like episode 37 or something. And as the borders open up a little bit more, we're seeing more face-to-face, person-to-person events, you know. As usual, I always advise everyone to be safe, but also take advantage of, I think, these communities that are out there. I know that for, you know, like Fabian and myself, we've greatly benefited from not just learning, but also exchanging ideas, exchanging thoughts with peers in the industry. So yeah, even as we open up the borders, even as you know countries become a bit more comfortable with the allowing people to get back together again, join these communities, help to build the community in whatever product and whatever market that you're in. Because in Southeast Asia, we're still quite nascent compared, you know, obviously to the Bay. But yeah, what one thing that we can do is give back to the community and be part of that community. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I will see you in episode 38. Bye bye.